Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to the Daily Drop-In Morning Show with the Teach Better team, where we get to be live every single morning, holy moly, Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern. We have a ton in store for this morning. I hope you enjoyed our Wacky Conversation Monday. Jeff Gargas killed it with Tracy Fuentes yesterday, and now we're headed and continued into a wonderful week with incredible guests, good news articles, lots of fun holidays, and we have a theme that we will be continuing to talk about. So get your coffee, go warm everything up, get ready for your day, and we'll be right back. Morning, everyone. I know it is a snowy Wednesday for a lot of you. It is Wednesday, January 5th, and we're just getting started. We have an incredible guest with us this morning that we have brought into our community before, but it's been ages, so I'm so excited to talk shop. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, everybody. My name's Danna. I'm joining you from Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm the founder and creator of Happy Teacher Revolution.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I've been following your work for years, and I actually interviewed you with Jeff back in 2020 when COVID had just entered the US, and we released your episode I think in May, and we had interviewed you a few weeks or a few months prior. I was so excited to bring you back, catch up, and learn all about the work that you're continuing to do.
Thanks so much, Rae. I'm so excited to be here and to connect with your incredible community and the Teach Better team. It's really great to be back.
Oh, it's so fun. Tell me a little bit about what you do for educators, because if our educators are not familiar, if they don't follow you on Instagram, that's going to be a major priority this morning. And I know this is exactly the type of thing that many of our listeners need to be focused on. I'm so excited to talk shop.
Yeah, so we organize and conduct support groups for education professionals. So while teacher is in our name, we serve and support anybody that serves and supports students in terms of prioritizing their well-being and their mental health so that we can create a healthier workforce that is joyful in their work, sustainable in their work, and also prioritizing their own social emotional learning to model that for our students.
So you guys may have been kind of relevant the last few years.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Not to say you weren't relevant. Not to say you weren't relevant before, because clearly that was a need, but holy moly, this is a little bit of a different spin over the last few years. How's that been for you?
Yeah, big time. And, it's been really interesting because reflecting on it, there is an entire spectrum of readiness when it comes to folks who are truly ready to engage in prioritizing their mental health and well-being in districts and leadership in terms of their readiness as well. So what we've seen is actually our sites that launched Happy Teacher Revolution support before the pandemic have doubled down and invested even more in these types of supports and collected data and evidence and research all along the way. So that has been really exciting that this has been something that has been a support before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and for folks enrolling now too.
No, it's so wonderful. So somebody's enrolling, and I know we're going to get into so much conversation. I know you have so many ideas and tips and tricks that you are constantly sharing. But if I am an educator, I'm just hearing about this for the first time, maybe I log on to Instagram and I go follow. If I choose to enroll, what does that mean for me? What can I expect in that experience?
Right. So when folks enroll in Happy Teacher Revolution, we welcome everyone exactly as they are. We're a place for belonging, for community. We offer free resources, and we also offer opportunities for folks to get certified in our methods and become a trained revolutionary. And so our revolutionaries are the folks that we call our meeting facilitators, the individuals who launch, initiate, and lead Happy Teacher Revolution support group meetings.
Nice. Tell me about these support group meetings. What does that look like? Is there a specific format that I could expect? How does that work?
Yeah, so every Happy Teacher Revolution meeting has the same set of ingredients, so to speak, for the recipe. But what's really cool is that each revolutionary or group facilitator adds their own uniquenesses to the group space. But every single Happy Teacher Revolution meeting starts first and foremost with the language and information around this being a listening space and not necessarily a therapy group or an advice giving space. That this isn't led by trained mental health professionals, that this truly is a space for folks to mindfully connect, to listen, and to share. We have a moment of mindfulness and introduction of members. We go over the 12 choices, which were adapted from Vicki Davis's 12 choices to step back from burnout. So things like, I choose the battles we're fighting. I choose to prioritize the relationships that matter. And no matter how the school year started, I choose to finish well. So that's a great opportunity for folks to lean in to the autonomy through our 12 choices. We have an open share. It ends with personal positive affirmations. So we also end every meeting with things like, I'm proud of myself for, I'm grateful for, I recognize the courage it took for me to, and so on.
Well, and this is why I love this program so much. This is why I was always so excited to bring you back into our network, to reintroduce you to so many educators that may not have chosen to connect with you the first time. Hopefully now they take on the challenge, because we do talk a lot about teacher wellness, teacher mental health, teacher care. But very often and truly, we just had this conversation the other day. Very often it's just discussed and it's not put into action, or it's discussed, it's encouraged to put into action, but there hasn't been any space provided for that to occur. And what I really appreciate about every conversation we've been able to have, and following you on social media, is that there is a lot of tactical things educators can do right now to actually begin to really invest in this work. And there's such a difference when you're saying, oh yeah, you guys should totally take care of yourself, right? We're seeing Jeff in the comments, Brad in the comments, Bree in the comments. Yeah, I hope you guys have a good day. Make sure you take care of yourself. But what you guys are really focused on is, how do we actually make that happen? How do we give you the tools to do that in a very chaotic space? So I really love all this work so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And the other exciting thing too is that, this is still a relatively new frontier when it comes to the research and the evidence and the ongoing collection of reasons why this matters in a way that's beyond like the fluffy self-care. Like, yes, social media is important for continuing the narrative around teacher well-being, I think, for things like that to trend, but really what we want to do is contribute to the body of research as to why caring for caregivers matters, and matters not just for their sustainability and well-being, but also how it's connected to student learning, student achievement, student social emotional learning, and equity as well. And so that's what's really cool, is that the folks who are participating in Happy Teacher Revolution are also participating in this new frontier when it comes to creating the research backing why this matters.
Well, and I think that's interesting you share that it's not just these strategies that we do know are really good for us because it feels good when we do them, but collecting that data, collecting that research is then not only furthering the work that you're doing, of course, but you're really able to go to a teacher who may not really believe in some of the work you're doing and saying, hey, this program is here for you when you're ready, but here is the data to prove that we've made an impact and that this change can positively impact you. I've never heard of anybody relate this to caring for a caregiver. Would you speak to that a little bit more? Speak to this research concept, only because we hear about research, but this act of really understanding how research affects us is so important.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that, because I think, it's still, like I said, it's still relatively new, but what we've learned has been a lot through the healthcare space in terms of the research around caregivers and nurses, compassionate care, moral distress, toxic stress, caregiver burnout for anyone who's in a relationship intensive profession. So when you're in a relationship building space with other humans, not even human, relationship intensive professions and caregivers, that extends to hospice workers, that extends to animal care professionals. But here in education, it's really important to consider. And for us, and since you and I last talked, Rae, that we've had a huge shift in the data we've collected and evidence and research in terms of reframing from, okay, helping educators survive, instead helping them thrive. So rather than measuring burnout, we're now measuring well-being. So we're saying, okay, for the folks who are demonstrating positive well-being, how do we replicate that? Rather than saying, oh, all this many teachers are burnt out. So we really dove into the RIF scale of well-being, RYFF. We have these types of resources on our website and www.happyteacher.info for some of the articles and statistics and things that I might mention. But we've really leaned into the RIF scale of well-being. So measuring things like autonomy, environmental mastery, positive relationships with others, personal growth, these types of things, because we believe the best social emotional curriculum for a student is that of their teacher, is the educator modeling self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills. I don't believe there's a curriculum that's as strong as that of the real living and breathing, adult who is exemplifying those competencies.
I know it sounds like a very silly comment, but even yesterday specifically, I had a number of different meetings with teachers. I was also in a school yesterday working with teachers, and there seemed to be a lot of shame that was being shared with the educators I was working with. And I don't think they were sharing this in any way besides just to kind of get it off their chest, but there was some guilt that was shared that, I don't know why I haven't figured it out yet this year. I don't know why this year's been so hard for me. Maybe this isn't good for me anymore. Maybe I'm not good at this job anymore. And I think just the simple connection between the work that teachers are doing and a medical professional or anything like that connection may mean so much. I know it means so much to me because a lot of us have a lot of respect for healthcare workers, a lot of respect for doctors, and to think that we also are experiencing, so many of those traumatic experiences of being a caregiver and how we can be better at that and take better care of ourselves through that, I think is such a wonderful connection. I think that's so good to think through that perspective.
Mm-hmm. And I think you are really speaking to like a larger implication of like you had mentioned, the shame and guilt, and especially like I think that this is something that we see for folks who are also parents or caregivers outside of their role as an educator, whether it's for their own children or for their aging parents or for someone else. I think the other thing is that the vicarious trauma piece, in terms of the grief and loss, especially surrounding COVID, like, no, we're not doctors and nurses, but like there is this immense amount of trauma that has happened, and we might not have witnessed it directly, but our students have, and their parents have, or our colleagues may have, So I think that's another thing to recognize is there's so much that's unseen for educators in terms of that workload and that massive plate of things that keep piling on and on and on, and nothing's being taken off. It can be incredibly overwhelming.
Well, I'm excited to get into some of the tips and tricks or strategies that we can share with educators as we continue our conversation this morning, because this idea is not only so important for our community, but really something that you guys are not just providing resources for, but truly in the trenches doing the work for every single day. So I really appreciate you getting up bright and early and talking with us. We're going to transition really quick to get into our good news story, our holidays for the day, kind of add some celebration, and then we'll continue this conversation as we go. So we'll be right back. Good morning, everyone. We're thrilled that you've chosen to start your morning off with us, or even if you're listening to this after the fact on Teach Better Talk podcast, or you caught this video after the fact on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch, we are thrilled that you're here. And we are really excited to bring you some good news stories and some holidays. There are some wacky holidays today. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about what holidays you might be choosing to celebrate from this list. Are you ready for this?
This is awesome.
This will be good. So today is National Bird Day. So while birds are amazing, there's a lot to be able to learn about them. So for those of you who are headed into the classroom this morning, focusing on birds might be a really cool bell ringer or something that you might want to incorporate into your lesson today. It is also World Whipped Cream Day. Are you a whipped cream lover?
I'm a big fan, especially on hot cocoa.
Yes. Oh my gosh. A few weeks ago, Brad Hughes and I came live on the show. It was a Friday, and it was Christmas Eve, and we both committed to making hot chocolate with a lot of whipped cream. So exactly, whipped cream is so good. Well, today is the day to enjoy this sweet treat. So if anyone needs whipped cream, I don't know why, but I bought 3 containers of whipped cream when I needed it for our segment that we did on Christmas Eve. I don't know in what world I needed 3 containers of whipped cream for our hour-long morning show. But if anyone needs whipped cream, call, text me, DM me. I got you. Plenty of whipped cream in my fridge right now. Maybe I'll need to put that on top of some hot chocolate this morning. It is also National Keto Day and National Screenwriters Day. I wonder if that could be something we incorporate with our students today as well, regardless of the age group that you teach screenwriting. I don't know if that's something that we talk a lot about or incorporate into our content. So that could be a really good opportunity too. In addition to that, we have a good news story that we like to present every single morning. You guys know that we bring you this good news story to not only build you up, hopefully it's something that inspires you or interests you, maybe sparks some ideas, but also you can utilize this as a way to foster relationships with a colleague as you're walking down the hall, maybe sharing a fun fact with them, or bringing it into your classroom as you're working with students to foster some sort of discussion as we continue to build relationships with the people around us, especially in our entire ecosystem of our schools. This one I thought was really interesting because space has been a really big topic over the last few days. That's just come up in my personal life. I don't know about you, but space is always interesting to me. I know that there's been a lot of different research elements going on with space. There's some good documentaries on Netflix right now that have really great space as the focus. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I just watched Hidden Figures again. Such a good movie. Have you seen that one?
I actually haven't seen it yet. I'm obsessed with Sally Ride. Like, I'm growing up dressed up as Sally Ride, and I'm reading a book now in the Quick about a female astronaut that I'm really loving.
See, I'm telling you, and I will give a shout out to Hidden Figures. I saw it before. I didn't nearly appreciate it or give it my focus. I just watched it like 2 days ago. So I really would totally recommend that movie. But even on Disney Plus, my friend was just talking yesterday about a new documentary that came out that had to do with a recent space shuttle launch. And I thought that was so well done as well. So anyway, let's talk about space just a little bit more. These are really cool fun facts or ideas that are definitely discussion starters for our students. This article says that astronomers are uncovering a large group of rogue planets. And it kind of gets into the difference between our planets that we know in our solar system and the concept of rogue planets. For those of you who may not be familiar, rogue planets are cosmic objects that are as large as planets, but specifically don't orbit the sun. Instead, they roam freely on their own. And as this research was being conducted, they found at least 70 new rogue planets in our galaxy. So they're talking about that these rogue planets can be as large as Jupiter, which I know as many of us know, even if you're not somebody who's into space, Jupiter is such a large planet in our solar system. And so as they were going through, they were talking about this new research that was originating actually in France and Austria on how these rogue planets are not only up in our space, in our galaxy, but also how it affects other things that are happening on Earth, even though they are, trillions of miles away. With these 70 rogue planets, they were talking about their comparison in size and their relationship to the sun. And to spot rogue planets, the team has used data that has been collected over the last 20 years. So with this article that I was reading, I really not only enjoyed this topic of space, but also kind of like we were alluding to at the beginning of the show, the power of sustainable research and ensuring that what we are collecting data on is really useful for us, how that can be useful for us long-term. Super interesting article. So for those of you interested in bringing space into your classroom this morning, there are some cool articles out there I would totally recommend. Any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned it, is I was thinking back to my days when I was a student, and I loved to nerd out around science, and I did science fair projects and competed at the International Science Fair, and my project was on, and it had to do with folks who do go into outer space. It was on the bystander effect of ionizing radiation. So when folks go into space, they're exposed to ionizing radiation and all other types of incidents where one might be exposed, whether it's like cancer treatment with the cancerous cells being exposed to radiation. But anyway, what happens is healthy cells, normal healthy cells, actually end up communicating as bystanders with the cells that are irradiated. And so there's this bystander effect that happens at the cellular level 5, 10, 15, 20 years post irradiation, where they're affected and communicate with one another. And I think about teachers as the bystander effect, bystanding, and witnessing, bearing witness to something that might happen, not necessarily to them directly, but in their environment, and how we are affected even at the cellular level. So I think it's really interesting that you bring that up today, because
Oh,
that
yeah.
was like an aha moment for me.
Well, and what a great connection to not only what we've been discussing, but even this article. Bree in the comments quoted you earlier, and it connects back to the work that we've been discussing. We'll continue to discuss throughout the show. Her comment here says, relationship intense career. That's a really positive way of putting it. Our profession is people. And I know that was something that you even noted earlier, that again, connecting that back. That is so neat. Thanks, Bree, for capturing that quote. That's so helpful. We're going to transition here into our brainstorm bank as we continue to foster our conversation around teachers, all educators in the field that work with students and everything in between. So we'll be right back. All right, let's continue to talk shop about the work being done and how we can better support you. As many of you know, our brainstorm bank is a segment we do every single day, regardless of the day of the week. And this is where we like to pause purely just for a moment and ask you, hey, friends, do you need anything? I know there's been a lot of chatter going on in our Teach Better community, whether you're following us on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, especially in our private group. There's been a lot of educators posing questions and looking for resources. And so if you have anything on your mind, anything that you are currently brainstorming through, please let us know. We'd love to be problem solvers with you. We obviously don't promise that we will have the perfect answer for you, but we really do love to make sure that you know you are not brainstorming or problem solving on your own. This is a community, and you are definitely in community with us, even through the times when we're not sure what the right solution is yet. So please feel free to throw that in the chat. I would personally, though, as we're waiting for those comments, would love to get back into some of the strategies that you use with educators in the work that you do. I know that you kind of like gave us a great overview and talked through what these sessions might look like. But as a teacher, what are some things that you can recommend to us that has to do with, really understanding how our mindset can impact the work that we do every single day?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing is to recognize how massive of a shift it might be, and to give yourself grace in terms of reframing your mindset around supporting your students, your loved ones, as you serve, by supporting yourself. Oftentimes, folks who are in this work are very self-sacrificing. They're used to saying yes to all of the things, might not have the best boundaries, and are giving until all of a sudden, their battery is on emergency level low and they're completely drained. And so the idea is, first and foremost, to recognize that, like, just bringing the self-awareness around this is the work. Like, that is the huge step. And having these conversations and conversations with oneself and reflecting with oneself, the self-awareness around it is really huge. The second thing is to recognize that, like I had mentioned, when the battery levels are getting in those emergency levels, like that's not the flag or sort of the notification to start plugging in your self-care and well-being. Like, you have to be plugged into it when your battery's on 97, 98, 99%. I still charge my phone to leak out those extra percentage points. Like, even when I'm at 98%, I'll still plug it in.
Yeah, you're right.
For self-care. Yeah.
Like every evening I charge my phone regardless of what battery number it's on. I love that completely.
And so the question is, like, how do you charge yourself at the end of every evening? Because really, it's like about the practices of morning rituals, evening rituals. Like, if it's so beautiful, you have this space and this community every single morning for folks. Like, that's huge. And I think that could be something that is like a trigger, or is something that is a cue for us to plug into our self-care well-being. It's like maybe dropping in every single morning with your team, recognizing you're not alone, and then maybe right after this having a meditation sit, or having an opportunity to journal, or having an opportunity to read for pleasure for just 5 minutes, whatever book you love, like something like that, so that you're starting the day and also ending the day with some type of ritual, maybe 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day. To jot that down, something like that is really important.
Even just in what you shared, I think sometimes when we talk about self-care, when we talk about morning routines and evening routines, it sounds like we need to commit a lot of time. Like that to me, that's what it sounds like. Like if I'm saying, okay, Rae, you're not taking care of yourself, you need to get a morning routine, you need to get an evening routine, you need to start putting some effort into this. To me, the only thing I hear is I don't have those hours, right? Like I don't know where that time's going to come from. Your suggestion, even just a few moments ago, of identifying 3 things you're grateful for, well that will take 2.5 minutes. I mean, that's not an hour and a half commitment of an evening routine, but it is a choice intentionally to reframe my mindset before bed. So I think that those types of reminders are really important for any educator, but especially at the beginning of the year as we're setting goals.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and it doesn't, and like you said, it doesn't take that much time. It doesn't need to be this super involved thing. I think when it's bite sized like that, it can be really powerful, and it extends to our students also. Like maybe at the end of every class, there's a popcorn out of things you're grateful for. Maybe at the beginning of every class, there's a song that's playing as folks are walking in or joining the Zoom or whatever. That's a song that you love that brings you joy. Like for me, it was always Jackson 5 ABCs. Or I Want You Back was our cleanup song. I just was like, it's the best,
No,
and it put me in a good mood, and like that's what matters.
and truly, I think that that's a beautiful reminder that sometimes we do things because we know it will bring joy or bring, a positive, emotion to our students. Sometimes through the transitive property, if we do that for ourselves, it will bring our students that same effect, and then we also get to refill ourselves. I love that you're bringing up music, especially at the beginning and end of a class hour. That was my reset. Like no matter how the class went, the last few minutes, I knew I could blast a great song, and that was going to restart the class hour. So that next hour, regardless of how the day's going, we can start with a clean slate. And those are choices that we can make truly for our own self-care. I know that sounds silly sometimes, but that's such a great example. Lori's in the comments here with something that she's brainstorming, and the comment says, biggest tips for cultivating an environment for self-paced learning. And Lori, I assume, is bringing up self-paced learning because our team, specifically the Teach Better team, has been focusing a lot on mastery learning. We focus a lot on our classroom instructional practices. And for those of you that are listening, and you probably already know this, but we are also, not only did we just host a week-long building a grid series during our daily drop-in time between Christmas and New Year's, but we do have a free webinar we're offering on January 14th to kind of go through how to foster a successful self-paced learning classroom. But I wonder, in terms of our conversation that we're having today, focusing on teacher well-being, culture that we can create, those choices of music, that really does have an element and a space of discussion in here. The biggest tips for cultivating an environment of anything definitely encourages learners to be open-minded, to carry that positive mindset, to not be living in a burnout space. Would you mind giving us your biggest tips for fostering an environment?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think the first tip is to recognize that it's not linear, that like we can hold space, that it's not this like leveling up, but more so an extensive opportunity for us to hold space. And I think, like I said before, that grace or that opportunity for us to lean in to like know that it's not going to be perfect. It's especially going to be clunky in the beginning as we're first trying out the self-care and well-being, just like our students interacting with new material. Like they're not going to master it right away. It's going to be a little bit clunky. There's going to be some kinks to get worked out, and the same goes for us. And creating that environment, like it starts with that educator, that leader in the space, because sort of like that metaphor of the weather vane. It's like you are the lighthouse. There could be tumultuous seas out there, but you're the lighthouse, and creating that foundation for yourself is so, so important. So I think the other thing is boundaries. Like teachers have a really challenging time with boundaries. And this was something before the pandemic also, but I think that's what's been really hard is this code switching of like having that professional life and also your personal life. Going back to the doctors and nurses and those types of caregivers metaphor, like they have their white jacket. And at the end of the day, they hang up the white coat and they get to be their authentic selves. So the idea is, how can we bring our authenticity into the work and also have a way to disconnect and detach from a place of love, from a place of self-love and love for our students, so that we can come back tomorrow with our full cup. So whether it's having some type of physical means of code switching, taking off your work lanyard with your ID. So I would just like change clothes when I would come home into, like my comfy clothes or whatever. It can be anything like that. Or maybe a song, and that's the way, or listening to a podcast episode, and that's the way to code switch. But I think it's really important to continue setting those boundaries.
Well, I like the challenge to everyone to really think through that code switch that you are discussing, because for a lot of educators, they might be doing that, but be doing it unaware of that the fact that they're doing that. Or they may not be doing that. And that concept of code switching can be an intentional act we can put into our day at the beginning and at the end of our teaching time, to intentionally try and make that shift for ourselves. And it may not be as easy as it sounds, right? You might end up going going home after a very long day and realize that even though you hung up the lanyard, you are still struggling to really leave that space to come into another space. But the concept of self, being more aware of these choices we can make, is specifically how we can get started in this process. And I think it's funny. I'm so glad we were able to touch on this, because Lori's comment about cultivating an environment of self-paced learning, with the work I do, I immediately want to give all these different strategies and reminders of instructional practices that we need to have that are really going to help with the culture. And to be able to have you on today to discuss this, it really is more than just the instructional things we can do to help cultivate this environment, but what emotional things, what health things can we do to, again, add to cultivating this environment. It is not a one size fits all, like, oh, if you have a tracking page for students, then you're going to cultivate an environment for self-paced learning. But how can we kind of layer this perfect deli sandwich in our classroom that has instructional practices and well-being practices and health practices to build the right environment? So I'm so glad we were able to focus on that. That's so important.
That's a great question.
Lori, as you continue your exploration with this environment, I hope you continue to add your thoughts in the chat, maybe some specifics you're looking for from an instructional lens. There's so many things that you can do that I truly believe set some infrastructure in your classroom. I know we could talk a lot about kind of those core fundamentals of a classroom that if you have that strong base, then anything you add from there is really, really positive. And I think being a healthy individual, being a healthy educator, caring for yourself and caring for others, like we've been able to talk about, is one of those pillars, right? Really making sure that space has those characteristics is important. And there's also obviously some instructional practices that can help with that self-paced learning. Goal setting and reflection, I think, is an enormous one that kind of straddles both lines of what we've been talking about today. You have some way to track students, some way to utilize something that we call the triage system, which is allowing students to not only advocate for their needs, but really level into understanding what level of need they have, so you can really facilitate that environment, is important. So Lori, let us know if you want us to continue to talk about that with some sort of specific questioning. Any additional tips or tricks that you think might be really important for us to consider this morning?
I think, this one comes from one of our educators that we've worked with here in Baltimore. And I'm really grateful for this, because I thought, wow, it resonated with me. And it's that the Zoom button isn't just for Zoom, or the mute button isn't just for Zoom. Like, the mute button is something that we need to engage in sometimes in our real life. Like, we don't need all of the stimulus or all of the opinions. Like, sometimes I think teachers are really looking for permission. And so I think one of the strategies is to write yourself a permission slip to commit to yourself, to commit to your own joy, whatever that is. Like you had mentioned before, this looks different for many different people. I don't have that answer of, oh, this is the joy solution, or this is what makes you feel the most fulfilled and restored. This is unique to each and every one of us. But to give yourself permission to access that, to tap in, and to press mute on the folks who are just might be committed to misunderstanding you, or to press mute on the messages or the voices of shame and guilt and just say, nope, I'm going to mute you today. And to release that, because I think that's really important, that that we are taking that time to reflect within one's own self-awareness and pressing mute for some of the noise and nonsense that's still out there.
Oh my gosh. When I was conferencing with students, I would always do these collaborative conferences, right? You'd bring in like 3 or 4 or 5 students up to a whiteboard, you'd be discussing something, and we would always use mute and pause and, like fast forward. And that was always our language to show that we needed to move on to the next person speaking, or that we wanted somebody else to share their voice. And it was just so funny because it was language that students understood because they would watch videos before all, the COVID Zoom call, extravaganza. But I've never thought of incorporating that same concept into our mental health and awareness as well. I think that's so valuable. I have so many such funny memories of working with the student. They're in the middle of describing their incredible aha moment, and you're like, up, mute, next. And you're like, the student's like, oh, I gotta wait and have somebody else share. And in the conference, it was always kind of funny. We would always giggle, like, ooh, you're muted, or oh, pause, and kind of like looking at that same mentality of how we work with our students to the other things that happen in our world, the other conversations and narratives that we can control is so powerful. That's a great tip.
Thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate you offering that anecdote about your students. And I also want to go to say that, like, use this. I don't know. Like, I just picture people say their staff meeting, be like, mute. Like, I know there's been times I'm in a staff meeting and I wanted to shout out mute. Even if you're not doing it verbally, like, you could just think to yourself and then giggle.
We are not condoning yelling aggressively in a staff meeting this morning. We are also not condoning, like, we're going to have a Teach Better team member sitting in a staff meeting. All of a sudden, they're going to put in their headphones and, like, turn on some music. And someone's going to be like, why is Barbara listening to her headphones? And she's going to be like, I'm sorry, I muted you for the day. You're out of time.
This is my self-care. Is muting.
We do need to obviously stay professional, but you know what? I even understand. Hopefully you don't mute us during daily drop-in, but in some regard, we get it. We understand. We do kind of joke on this show that, while we hope you jump in and tune in and participate in the comments, which, by the way, we so love all the comments this morning. It's been so wonderful. But we also know that this is a time in teachers' morning, depending on where they're located, especially, East Coast Central Time Zone, where they might like put this on their phone in the bathroom, but they're walking around their house, they're getting dressed, and they're kind of multitasking, listening. And, while we really appreciate the multiple ways that people may be engaging with the daily drop-in every morning, however you're engaging is fine as long as you don't mute us. That's really all that matters. On Wednesdays, we get to get into some recommendations. And something I've loved about our conversations always is that you are so full of ideas for educators. And when I say educators, I'm specifically not saying teachers, because I know that you support administrators and everybody within that whole learning space. So we're going to get into some recommendations here because it's Wednesday. And I will tell you, I really do love this little commercial here, this little tune. So let's get started. I will tell you, Brad Hughes is a member of our Teach Better team and also an elementary principal. And he says, I would welcome it. I would laugh so hard. Bring it on. If that's how you want to handle a staff meeting, that's so funny.
That's awesome.
Chad's jumping in saying, oh, yes, please. Staff meetings of boredom are a different breed. That's totally true. Lori is also jumping in. And I know she just posted this comment, kind of getting into that same conversation we were in before. She says, music is great. Turning down the lights can also be a cue for a lot of these things, setting up routines, providing resources. And then she gets to a question here at the end. How do you get them to want to be in charge of their learning, motivation? Lori, that is such an important question, not only for today, but really as you continue, is really identifying what drives your students. I know in Lori's comment earlier, she was talking about facilitating a self-paced environment. And just because something's self-paced doesn't mean that our students are necessarily motivated by that concept of self-paced. Some students might be, and that's wonderful, but Other students will need to find motivation in their learning. We're asking them to work harder than they've ever worked before, and we're holding them accountable for their learning. That motivation needs to be a part of that instruction. So before we transition to recommendations, can you speak to your thoughts on the concept of motivating students? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think, it's something that I think about a lot, honestly, with myself and my own self motivation. And for me, I think I found that I have challenges when it's a task that's really big that feels so daunting, and I know that I won't be able to finish it perfectly and with a nice pretty bow at the end of the day, but rather I'll still have to keep chipping away at it a little by little. And so I think when it comes to that type of motivation and self-paced learning, that okay, like there's lessons, there's content, there's material that we're not going to necessarily master and perfect in just one day's lesson. So rather, I think it's an opportunity to consider those bite-sized quick wins. So that little bits of motivation rather than it being like just the one at the end. So that way, folks, because that's real life, it's like that's real life. That's how I'm building Happy Teacher Revolution. It's one piece at a time. It's how I'm writing my book. It's one word, one sentence, one chapter at a time. This isn't something that gets perfectly finished just in a short amount of time. And in the world that we live in, it's such like a quick fix, automated. There isn't much wait time anymore. It's like students will turn something in. Okay, did you grade it yet? It's like you're literally just handing it to me. So I think there's an opportunity for motivation when it comes to considering more of those bite-sized quick wins. So that there is that opportunity for students and for us too.
Well, and I appreciate your recommendation, not only about chunking, which is so important, but also your recommendation is reflecting on your own practices just because you're a human being and what works for you. And Lori, I couldn't agree more with that type of approach. Really thinking through every single person's motivated by different things, and different combinations of motivational strategies will work for different people. Chunking absolutely helps me. I hate looking at a big daunting task. So if somebody can help me identify those small wins as I go, that's a huge support. I'm also motivated by other things too, though. And so, Lori, as you continue to think through what is motivating your learners, the concept of facilitating a self-paced classroom might motivate a few of your learners. There's a lot of students that haven't had the freedom to explore content in that self-paced environment, and they're going to be so motivated by you trusting them with this freedom to learn. That will absolutely work for a student. But there are a lot of students that are also going to use motivation in other ways to be successful. And as a teacher, you've seen all those types of examples before. The students that are motivated by earning points or earning tickets or earning, a piece of candy is just as valuable in a self-paced learning environment. But the difference is, and this is truly the difference that I believe in self-paced learning, is that now you have the time to meet with that student and really discover what drives them to be successful. Before, if you were just standing in front of a classroom of 34 students, you really did have to kind of hope that the 5 strategies you thought of to motivate your students were going to work. Now, all your students are going to have the opportunity to learn and grow at their own pace, which is going to free you up as the content delivery system to really being a facilitator in the classroom. So one of the things as a facilitator you might do is take the time to learn what motivates your students and enact those changes in your classroom. So hopefully that gives you some ideas, Lori. Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's really insightful. And I think it's also learning your students why, and for them to understand their why also. So like coaching and facilitating them understanding like, why do I care about this? Why is this something that matters? And for us to not only facilitate that self-discovery, but to learn alongside with it.
Well, and that awareness, right? Like as teachers, we are trying to discover so many things. Their why is a perfect example. And you're right that sometimes we're hunting for something that the student is unaware of. So now then you need to back up a little bit more and say, okay, how can I help you identify and be more self-aware of what motivates you, which depending on the student you're working with, the age group doesn't matter. That is an awareness that comes with so many different coaching avenues. But when the student's aware of what motivates them, you can do your job more effectively as the teacher by using that to continue their learning. So lots of good tips. Lori's in the comments saying, yes, that's great. Thank you. So I'm glad, Lori, that we were able to brainstorm with you this morning. As we get into recommendations, I know this week, we've been able to talk about a lot today, but this week is all about setting goals, getting ready for your year, putting in supports in place to be successful. A lot of people have mentioned the concept of picking their word for the year, right? All that stuff. What are your go-to resources that you like to utilize or revisit time after time to help you stay focused on the work that we've been able to touch on today?
So I have a stack of books right next to my computer, but here are some of my favorites. Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They're both sisters. And Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself by Nidra Glover Tawwab. So, and then this one about trauma. What Happened to You, from Conversations of Trauma, Resilience, and Healing, from Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. So those are some that I just have right next to my computer, because I found those resources to be really helpful in terms of understanding like some of the boundary setting, what it looks like to have a stressful relationship intensive job, and how to complete the stress cycle. And also I'm talking more about vicarious trauma.
I have not heard of any of those resources. I'm so glad you're able to recommend those, because truly that's the beauty of bringing people on the show and having good different conversations, is learning about all these different influences and resources that have positively impacted us. I want to encourage everybody on our network to go check out one of those 3 resources or all 3. And whether you're choosing to read the book, some of those might be available in audio form, so you can listen just like a podcast. I mean, definitely go check out those opportunities to explore this concept even further. That was so helpful.
And anything on shame and vulnerability, and we mentioned that guilt, check out Brene Brown. I would highly recommend. Yes, on to Brene. Someday I hope I get to meet her. That's on my bucket list for sure. But, she has an awesome podcast, and there's her talk on Netflix, and she has great TED Talks.
So good. Yes, I hope that for you. Like, I'd love to meet her, but really, if you meet her, I feel like it's almost like the transitive property. Like, that'll work for me. So that's my hope for you. Get that off your bucket list. For everybody who's listening, I'd love to also encourage them to connect with you, the work you're doing. Like we said from the very beginning, I've been following you for a long time, and I love that you really do foster a community. And, Teach Better, I always joke about, like, I feel like we do 2 different things, right? As a Teach Better team, we do partner with districts. We do provide professional development. That's a big part of our team. But we also foster this global community of educators that are dedicated to the Teach Better mindset, right? Being a little bit better today than you were yesterday, and a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. And what I love about the work you're doing is that you truly believe in this community mindset as well. And so I just want to remind our Teach Better network, you can be a part of so many communities that only is going to support you further. So go be active in the work that we've been able to talk about, and hopefully it fuels you in a way that still encourages you to continue your pursuit of better. So would you mind sharing a little bit about how teachers can connect with you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So join us, join the revolution. Check out happyteacherrevolution.com for more free resources, to sign up for our newsletter, www.happyteacher.info. If you want to send me an email, hello@happyteacherrevolution.com, or my first name, Danna, Danna, @happyteacherrevolution.com. Follow us on social media @happyteacherrevolution, Twitter @happyteacher, HTR. We have a private Facebook group also with our folks that have joined us from all over the country, all over the world. We're in Canada, we're expanding in Mexico, we've launched in Africa. We're in almost every state in the United States. So it's really exciting to just connect with other folks. If you feel like you don't have that team or that community where you are, it's out there. So I'm just so grateful for everyone listening, tuning in, and for the Teach Better community. This has been so much fun.
Oh, so good. I appreciate you sharing all those resources and ways to connect as well, because as you guys know right now, you are listening on a social media platform or you're listening on a podcast, and they have all these different supports as well. So go with your comfort zone. If you're already watching us on Facebook, go connect on Facebook with them. Go join their private Facebook group and everything in between. I personally love to follow you guys on Instagram. That's just where I love to consume all your content. So thank you for all that you do. I so appreciate you waking up bright and early and joining us this morning.
Oh, this has been so fun. And yeah, send me a DM, like, we're here, like You're not alone. I'm really grateful for you, Rae. And thank you for, I feel like I know you, and it's crazy that we haven't even met in person, but maybe someday.
Someday.
I'm just so excited for all the incredible work you're doing and your amazing community. Thank you to everyone for the comments and great questions too. It's been a really awesome morning.
So fun. For everybody, we hope that you have an absolutely wonderful Wednesday, January 5th. I can't believe it's January 5th, 2022. We're thrilled that you are here. As a reminder for our network, and obviously you're getting our emails, I don't need to go through all this stuff, but as a reminder, that free grid method webinar is happening on the 14th next week. So please go make sure you register. We definitely want to make sure that you have access to that free conversation that we'll be having about mastery learning, about self-paced learning. You can register for that at teachbetter.com/grid webinar. Just DM me if you can't find it. I will send you the link. In addition to that, we have a big announcement happening on Monday, January 10th. So make sure you stick with us around that, and a lot more surprises as we continue, including that proposals open for the Teach Better Conference on March 1st. So you have about a month or 2 months to continue to prepare that proposal. We'd love to have all of you sharing your voices, your tips and tricks at that event. So please make sure you keep an eye out for all that. Please go enjoy the best Wednesday ever. Go connect with all the resources we've been able to share today. And we will see you later today for our brain break. I apologize, our brain break later this afternoon. And we'll be back tomorrow morning, obviously, again for Daily Drop-In. So thank you for all of you, friends, and we'll see you later.